Okay. um, I just wanted to do another chit chat just to check in if anybody has any comments or questions. Um, I wanted to mention that somebody commented on Stuart Hameroff's recent quantum biology talk, and I had posted a few comments, and he replied, and hello, if you have any questions or comments. Okay. So anyway, Stuart Hameroff, he mentioned in his recent talk that that non-locality was a possibility in his quantum consciousness science as an anesthesiologist, and he's working with Roger Penrose. And Stuart Hameroff also said the paranormal. And so I realize nobody's listening right now, but I don't mind talking to myself. So um and if anybody wants to listen later on, they can just post any comments or questions in the comments section. So so basically Stuart Hameroff, he acknowledges that his model um could include non-locality and the paranormal, what he calls the paranormal, which is funny because his collaborator, Sir Roger Penrose, sort of dismisses the paranormal. He does because he's Roger Penrose. He's agnostic, and so he doesn't really believe in that stuff. But Basil J. Hiley, he also says that the paranormal is not ruled out by his non-commutative quantum biology model. So I did a new blog post recently because somebody had asked me a question in my in reply to my comments on Stuart Hameroff's talk on quantum consciousness, and they had asked me if they thought general relativity was involved, and so I just started talking about non-commutativity. And the of course the word non-commutativity kind of scares people off because most people have never heard of the word non-commutativity. And so then it's like, well, if you've never heard of it, then how do you even start explaining it? And Alon Khan, I've emailed him several times. I've never gotten a reply back, but he did publish recently a what he called a non-technical introduction to non-commutative geometry. And so I can post the links later on in the comments section or the description of this video when I end the stream. But essentially, even though it's non-technical, obviously it's pretty technical because he can't avoid it. But he does. He always falls back on Heisenberg, and he's basically saying, well, Heisenberg in the 1920s, I think it was like 26, he realized that the energy of light when it's emitted and absorbed by matter using like I can't even say the word spectrograms, but what they call the Ritz-Rydberg combination principle. But he realized that those are transition frequencies that are non-commutative. He didn't even he didn't use the word non-commutative at first. It was his teacher Max Born who realized that they're non-commutative, and then Max Born asked his other students to do the use the matrices mathematics. And so that's how you got this Heisenberg algebra approach to what would be the foundation of reality, which is the quantum physics in terms of science. Now, to bring it back to quantum biology, this idea of a transition frequency, well, Alon Khan, he uses music theory to explain it, and which is really it's really awesome and for me because it Alon Khan he corroborated what I had discovered on my own as a teenager, and then I noticed when I took quantum physics my first year at college, I noticed it was the same logical explanation of the Dirac dance. You know, where you're the Dirac dance is where you're supposed to keep the cup. You know, you can't spill the cup. I can't get it on camera here, but you have to keep the cup horizontal, which you can't see it, but you get the idea. So you have this 720-degree transformation where there's a twist in it, and this is what they call spin, or what Roger Penrose calls a spin, or but it's using Clifford algebra. Now, this whole thing with as soon as you talk about mathematics and physics, you lose the connection with the biology because biology is it's from the inside out. You know, because we're humans, we're alive, and so this is Brian Josephson's big point. Is Brian Josephson? He got the Nobel Prize, but he can't even get a paper published on Archive, which is the preprint website, even though he has a Nobel Prize. And I discussed this with him. He's like, because he recommended to me, he's like, well, if you want to get a paper published, or you should try the preprint on this, like some other website. That actually, it's a website that Basil J. Hiley's book chapter has a preprint on that website. It's like 2022. But I don't try to get a paper published because it's like this stuff. Like, you know, Brian Josephson said that Jack Sarfati does not understand attention. So, in other words, he's talking about basically like meditation in biology and philosophy, or what we would call like logical inference in philosophy. Um, and so Brian Josephson, he started out in transcendental meditation, but then he told me he's practicing qigong at Cambridge. And so, you know, since he got a Nobel Prize, he's a professor now, and he can just do his own thing. But he's completely dismissed by academia, well, for the most part, unless they're using his Josephson effect, which is the definition of the volt. You know, I mean, there's tons and tons of papers that reference his Josephson effect, or the Josephson junction. You know, for the that's used in MRI machines, and so the idea in quantum biology is you have the same type of superconductor at room temperature, because of the low heat capacity of certain atoms, um, like nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. And this was the big point of Andrew Cochrane. And I don't, you know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physicist. I'm just I read the scientists and just study the concepts, and then I apply that back to to biology as meditation. Hey, hi Sandy. Okay, yeah, it's diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous. And the product, what was the product? It's Harris. Harris is the company. So if you search Harris diatomaceous earth, I know that Ace Hardware sells it, and they could order it to get it in stock. Where luckily it was in stock where I bought it. I just went in and it was real cheap. It's food grade diatomaceous earth. And and diatoms are algae. They're a type of algae. Is that good enough for you? You can copy and paste that, right? Okay, great. So actually there was a now that you mentioned it, there's this scientist, this young scientist woman who has a geology channel, and I asked her to make a video about algae in the deep oceans, and she made one. Her latest video is on. Did you see that? Okay. Yeah, she made a video promoting deep ocean algae fertilization, and I don't know, I can't remember her name because it just comes up in my algorithm. And I watch so many videos. Um I don't know if it's like Geo Girl. It might be Geo Girl. I don't remember. I don't think it's Geo Girl though. It's something similar to that. She's, young woman. But anyway, so yeah, there's I just watched this Marxist professor, and I emailed him. Okay. Yeah, I'll send it. I'll post it on your channel. I post pretty much everything else on your channel, right? Um, yeah, this Marxist, yeah, it might be something like I don't know if it's Science Girl. The whole girl moniker is so common now that um I'll find it. Uh Anyway, yeah, this Marxist professor guy, I think the talk was from a year ago, and he was talking about it was on the Anthropocene. He was talking about how the Anthropocene is not appropriate because of capitalism. It should be called the something like capital scene or something like that. And he's saying like if you call it the Anthropocene, you're just handing over the crisis to quote unquote managers, like bourgeois managers, which is I guess is what he would consider to be scientists and or like natural scientists. And but then he referred to, well, the next 50 years. And so I emailed him. I said, well, like, look, you got to study the actual, if you're talking about the crisis, you need to study. I told him, I listed like Jim Massa, Andrew Glickson, um, Natalia Shakova, uh, who else? Peter Carter. I said, you got to like study the actual like scientists that are know what's going on with the. Anyway, I doubt I'll hear back from them, but I'm always emailing professors and sort of like haranguing them about stuff. But yeah, so the this idea of quantum biology, obviously, he did bring up an interesting thing about the John Locke. He said how John Locke wrote the Constitution for the Carolinas in the 1700s, and that the it did not, in the Constitution it said they could not make a any kind of contract with the savages, quote unquote, because savages are not improving the land, improving the land. and and that really brings it back to Platonic philosophy, because this whole idea of improving the land is based on what, how you define productivity from the Western Platonic philosophy. And he never mentioned Platonic philosophy because Marxism is within the context. Marxism is a critique of the exponential function and the logarithms, but it doesn't go outside of it. So basically, it's like systems theory. You know, they use the analogy of metabolism. They're like, well, we need a urban metabolism as political ecology and blah blah. I mean, it's not. They never put nature first. They try to assimilate nature. They're like, well, Marx in his later years, he realized that primitive, the so-called primitive cultures were actually advanced in terms of ecology and all this. But it's like, yeah, well, he did that after he was against the traditional peasants. Like, there's a book called Marx Against Peasants. It's an actual book. And there was another Marxist professor talking about the ecological crisis, and so I emailed him too, and he's like, oh, it's already been proven that Marx was an environmentalist, and he wasn't against peasants, and he's like, that's long been debunked or whatever, and it's like, okay, whatever, you know, that's the whole point is like if they don't put nature first and prioritize, and that's the whole thing about algae. It's like, well, because algae is only 1% of the equivalent of land biomass, but it's 50% of photosynthesis on the planet. And oil is from algae. So it's like, if people, the future of life on Earth is going to be algae one way or another. And so, well, yeah, it is Earth Day, right? So I can rant about ecology and I having a good excuse. Um, anyway, but yeah, it's kind of exciting that the whole deep ocean algae fertilizing thing. There's definitely a segment of scientists that are taking it seriously. And I emailed the guy at Monterey Ocean Institute, and he's the guy who said, yeah, he's the guy who said that algae. Remember the quote I used when I did your show is algae is the only thing that can stop an out of control climate. And so I emailed him and I reminded him of that quote because that quote was from 2008 when the UN passed this law or whatever that you cannot fertilize the oceans. And I was like, okay, you know, can we, can we, is it time now? Can we fertilize the oceans? I didn't hear back from him either because, well, obviously, like if you get an email from Void is Yin Yang. Yeah, that that I did. I don't, what did I do? Following you. Okay, so now to bring it back to non-commutativity in quantum biology. So the radical idea of non-commutativity is that matter is actually made of light. Matter is made of light, and I discovered recently this guy. There's this PhD in biology that's called non-commutative biology, and they're using non-commutativity to try to create synthetic biology. And of course, you know, I didn't even read the PhD thesis because I'm not. Oh, you've been in Toronto? Okay. Wow, two birthday parties. Rock on. That's nice. That's nice. You can party. I'm. I just did. We had a spring cleanup day here, so that was my party, was, running the trailer running the trailer for our HOA and hauling it up the hill to the city, drop-off site or whatever, and then just chit-chatting with people, and, anyway, So yeah, I'm starting to do it's we had a really long rain here, which was really exciting for the state because obviously we didn't really have a winter. And so everybody was freaking out about drought. And now they're like, oh, we won't have drought. We'll be fine. And the grass is really green. It's really nice. But I guess El Nino is they. I looked it up, and they. I guess they figure it's going to end in May. It's going to be pretty much over. Um, and then so people are assuming that everything's going to be back to normal. But and then we had this obviously like the coral bleaching that just happened in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific and with the Great Barrier Reef, and then in the Caribbean, um, and Florida. And then, so that's the the problem is it happens so much faster that, since the previous time that the reefs don't have time to recover. And so it doesn't look like they'll have a chance to recover, because if it already happened too fast this time, then obviously it's probably going to happen again. And so yeah, the it's kind of what's what's wild about it is you'll get news story on it, like PBS covered it, and I think maybe like CBS did a story on it. I didn't watch the guy. I was gonna watch it. I didn't get around to it, but um they don't like the news coverage is, what did they say? It's even less and less of global warming in 2023. So, um, I mean, we're already getting drought and famine is a serious crisis, but it's not hasn't quite hit the industrialized countries as much. So they just try to ignore it, or they put it in the context of like these neo-colonial wars where you have like in the Tigray region, they're like, well, they were labeled terrorists or something, and they're some kind of liberation front, and they're lying about they were selling the food off and not giving it to the people that are starving, and then using it to buy weapons and all this. And so you have all these shenanigans, and um, of course you got that with the genocide in Gaza. And of course, you had the same thing in Iraq with the genocide in Iraq. And but yeah, Peter Carter, they just did a show on that where they acknowledge, like, well, the famine and food crisis is the worst it's ever been now in the modern world. So what did the UN said? I posted before this, and what it was, they're expecting, what is it, like over 100 million people, like 108 million or something. But and then I said, well, I think it's going to be a lot more than that. And it's I don't know. I mean, because I read that you have West Africa and the Sahel, like pretty much most of Africa, I think, is has a drought and food crisis. So um and anyway, I don't you know the in my personal life, I was like, I realized we were doomed by 1996, which is, as I mentioned before. And so logically, I was like, okay, well, what happens after death? And I just watched this talk by this guy Jeffrey Long. I think he's a MD, and he just like published another big study on near death experiences, and he compiled like thousands of people. I think maybe it was like 10,000 people that had near death experiences, and he's trying to find all the commonalities of what people will definitely experience. And as far as their religious belief, they in in India they call it Ishwara, which is like their your sort of like your, you maybe you'd call it your spirit guide or something like that. But he says the appearance changes based on somebody's belief, whatever their belief system is. Um, it seems to mirror their own personal what they need to experience some kind of guiding spirit after death, that and then they have some kind of life review, and they have this deep emotional, first they'll experience like this huge sense of love, overwhelming love from the heart, and then but then they'll experience the in their life review, they sort of have a learning experience, like what the kind of emotions that they caused other people's to experience, and then they learn empathy from that, and that brings you back to what is called non-dualism in non-Western philosophy. So I'm coming full circle back here. Thank you. Correct. So in the idea of non-dualism is there's lots of YouTube channels about non-duality and non-dualism, but it's something I studied. I started studying it to finish my master's degree in non-Western philosophy. And what I learned through my own experience is that Westerners, we tend to misunderstand non-dualism because of Western Platonic philosophy, we tend to think of eternity as some kind of like static static realm, like nothing ever changes. Like that's what we think of eternity as, is like it's eternal and it'll always be there. But but it turns out that that's what in like in India in the yoga philosophy, this is what they call Ishwara. So like in meditation, you close your eyes and you visualize light, and the more you meditate the stronger that light gets, and then eventually you'll see light with your eyes closed, but then you'll start seeing light with your eyes open, and that's what they call the absolute void. Because when you start to see light with your eyes open, you can start to see auras around people, and then you I had the experience of actually seeing ghosts. And then I also saw spirits that Qigong master Chen Yulin creates out of the top of his head when he heals people. Um, anyway, so the non-dualism, it's more of this eternal motion, as what in quantum physics is called proto-consciousness. So you cannot see it. It's not light itself, but it's this pure information, and it's a new type of energy. And this is what Basil J. Hiley talks about. He says this new type of energy, a new quality of energy, has been discovered in what they call the quantum potential. And so that's the whole secret, is in meditation, you can actually resonate this new type of energy and then store it up. And that's the secret of the meditation training. So that's all I really wanted to say. And wishing everybody a nice full moon Earth Day, and we'll talk. I'll I'll rant some other time. Okay. All right. Thanks. And yeah, feel free to post any comments in the comment section. All right. Thanks, Sandy. Okay. See you later. If I look stoned, I'm really not, but I'm just boring. I like to be boring as possible.